this episode, I'm excited to introduce Andrea Bumstead, founder and CEO of CS Impact, a fractional consulting and services company focuses on turning customer success into revenue, focusing on companies between the 50 and 150 million ARR.
Welcome, Andrea. Super excited to dig into many things related to customer success, and I'm sure we'll go beyond that. Why did you create CS Impact? This has been around for about 6 months now. So tell us the story about how you went from being a VP of customer success to working with a bunch of companies to help them figure out their customer success.
This is a great question. I did not set out to create my own business. This was not in the plans. I was a vice president of customer success. The company that I was with went through a leadership restructure. I was looking for my next vice president of customer success role. I knew the job market was going to be really tough. So I talked with enough people to know that it was going to be hard. When I started looking, I came out of the gate running. I had an executive coach. I was adding 50 people to my network a week. I was talking to 25 people a week, and I interviewed at over 30 companies.
It's a full-time job.
It was a full-time job, exhausting. I also came in last 4 times. So 4 times they were like, it was down to either me and one other person, or it was just me. And they were like, okay, well, if you're not a good fit, then we'll go out into the market again and see. So I wasn't even competing with anyone. I came in last 4 times, and I still didn't get the role. And I realized 2 really important lessons. So this was over about a 7-month period. So 30 companies, about 7 months. This was literally my full-time job and then some. And the 2 things that I learned is, one, companies don't want to commit to a senior leadership hire. They just don't want to take the risk right now. So unless someone checks every box, size, stage of company, industry, came through their network, and has been in the role for like 5+ years, they don't want to take any chances. So like hiring is really expensive, firing is even more expensive. And there's a lot of things happening sort of macroeconomically, politically. There's a lot of uncertainty, and companies just, they don't want to take a risk. It's not like 5 years ago when a company would take a bet on a director and make them a vice president. That's just not happening today. So that was the first lesson I learned. Companies don't want to commit. The second lesson I learned was very interesting, which is that I didn't want to commit either. So after speaking with over 30 companies, talking to 25 people a week, what I realized is that all of these companies are kind of a mess. They have churn problems, growth problems. They're bootstrapped and they have no money. They have failed mergers and acquisitions. They have leadership problems and morale problems. The list sort of went on and on and on. And I thought, I could have an impact and help companies solve big, meaty problems, which is what I like to do. I could do that for a number of different companies and have very little commitment or very low commitment to both the company and to me. So they could bring me in for however long they needed to bring me in. I would just jump right in and help them solve their problem. And then once we've solved it, they can either keep me or we can move on. I came in last twice in the same week, which was brutal. I kind of thought, okay, I've got nothing to lose at this point. This one company, they didn't hire me for cultural reasons. This is the reason they gave me. Not
A good culture fit.
is what they said. That was on the Monday. They told me on the Monday, we really like you, but we're just not sure that you're the right fit, is what I was told. On the Tuesday, I went back to them and I said, look, you have a really big problem. You have no leader in seat. You have no other candidates in the pipeline. You have this very ambitious growth goal that the board is all over you about. You're losing time. I'm available right now. And you know that I can execute because as part of the interview process, we did this big data analysis. I said, you need me. And I'm going to give this to you for no commitment. Like however long, just bring me in while you look for your next leader. So Monday, they tell me, you're just not quite the right fit. Tuesday, I tell them, you really need me and you should just hire me. Wednesday, they were like, you're hired. So that just proved to me that companies really don't want to commit. And so I took all the risk out of it and I worked for that company for about 3 months while I hired their next leader. So That's how I created my business. I didn't go out and just think like, oh, I'm going to create a business. I basically went out, talked to a lot of companies, realized that they didn't want to commit. I didn't want to commit. And I could basically go in and solve their problems at scale. And so that's what I started doing.
I have so many follow-up questions. That's a really good story. I think people probably hear you're not a cultural fit often. And I do think there's something to it. And you don't have to go into like this exact company if you're not comfortable doing that. But what do you think that is? Is it that it's not a cultural fit? Is it that it's not the right skill set? Where do you think that comes from for people?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I do genuinely think that there is circumstances where someone's not the right cultural fit. I mean, I've hired a lot of people in my career, and there are just some people where you're like, they would fit in this organization, and not necessarily that they think the same, right, or that are the same, but just that, I don't know, that the culture,
Communication styles.
I don't,
Yeah.
yeah, right. So I do think that that's a genuine reason why someone doesn't get a role. I mean, look, you know it if you get into an organization that's not a good cultural fit for you. You can feel it right away. Where if you're used to being loud and having a seat at the table and a voice all the time, and you get into a company where there's a hierarchy, right? And you don't really speak unless spoken to, then that's not a good cultural fit, right? But I do think that cultural fit is also the reason that companies give when they're just really not sure the true reason why they're not hiring you. There's just a reason. Or sometimes there's another reason, and cultural fit is the easy reason. It's kind of like when someone breaks up with someone and they say, well, it's not you, it's me.
There's a reason I've interviewed at Amazon a bunch of times, and I'm like, I don't fit here. Like, there are certain organizations that you can even acknowledge that you don't fit in. I think that the other point around companies being really risk averse to senior leadership positions, we just hired a few months ago a VP of product who's great. We put him through 23 interviews. 23. And thank God he like stuck around in the process and he was the right fit for us. But I was like, "Oh my god, we are very risk averse because that is a lot of people to get to know this person to give the okay on." And so I think that's something that any senior leaders have to be like really aware of. I felt that in partnership and business development too. Like it used to be people, in your LinkedIn constantly like, you want to come work here? You want to come work here? You want a bunch of money? You want SVP title? And I don't get that anymore. Like it is a different, work environment that we're in. I'd love to like dig in a little bit more on why you think what's like the broader issues around customer success that you think are really troubling companies right now at a high level.
There's a lot. I mean, the biggest one I think is churn is up across the board in SaaS right now. So it doesn't matter if you are a very small company, you're sub 10 million, if you're a billion-dollar company plus, churn just across the board as a trend is up, which is hard for companies, right? Because churn impacts valuations, it impacts cash flow, it impacts, right? Like it impacts growth rate, it impacts all kinds of things. And it also impacts just perception in the market, right? Your ability to get references, like it has this like ripple effect. So I would say the number one thing that I'm seeing in organizations is that churn is up across the board. Now, there is some prediction and a bit of research to back it up. I know Churn Zero did some research and saying that like it's stabilized now, that like it hasn't sort of gotten any worse. And so 2025 is this sort of new bench line of like, okay, churn is here right now. The prediction is that 2026 will be better, and then it will get a little bit better from there. The biggest impact right now from a customer success standpoint is the churn. And of course, when you have churn up across the board, you're really trying to retain your customers, and then you're also trying to grow your existing customers to make up for some of that lost revenue. And you're trying to drive more new business to make up for the lost revenue. So there's a lot of pressure happening within companies. And again, they're very risk averse, right? Very afraid to hire a customer success leader. They want to make sure they get the right one, good fit. That's why it goes to, 21 interviews. But yeah, I'd say the number one thing organizations are struggling with is churn, at least on the post-sale side right now.
And to double click on that a little bit, and I should go read this report, the Churn Zero report, but why? Is it because of the economic pressures around profitability? So CFOs were like, go cut a bunch of unnecessary tools. Is it because customers are expecting different levels of support? Is it all the new AI tools coming out? Probably a mixture of everything. But what's kind of your opinion on why churn's up?
I'm actually doing my own study right now on why exactly that is. And so rather than doing a formal report, what I've committed to doing is just talking to 200 go to market leaders, sales, marketing, customer success, and asking them, why is churn up across the board? So far, I've talked to about 45 people and I've recorded notes after every conversation because I want to create a report. And my report is more based on like actual conversations, right? That I'm having.
Qualitative.
People- Yeah, on the ground. So it's a different type of report, right? It's basically an interview style of like what's happening across the board. What's really interesting is there are some patterns to the responses. So some of the patterns that I've heard over and over again are like sort of macroeconomic, political sort of environments, right? Companies are trying to decrease their spend. I've heard a lot of companies taking their sort of tech stack and stack ranking it sort of top to bottom in terms of value. Everything on the bottom goes, right? And there's a lot of, companies trying to consolidate tools. It used to be that, companies would subscribe to Microsoft and Google Suite and Slack and Teams and it would just and, right? They had everything and companies are trying to consolidate. So I definitely hear that one quite a bit. Other reasons I've heard for churn is a little bit around AI. So companies trying to experiment with AI, seeing what they can do. Sort of, can we do things with AI that normally we would have used a different tool for? So I've heard some of this. I've also heard the quintessential, sales to customer success handoff is broken. I've heard from sales leaders like my quota went up 4x. So any deal I can get in the door, we're getting it in the door, right? Which has an impact on churn because then you're closing more bad fit deals. The most interesting reason I heard, which I never thought of before, someone in cybersecurity said, with how big and sprawling companies' tech stacks have gotten, they are open or have left themselves open to a much higher degree of risk of cybersecurity attack. There's so many open sort of ports across this tech stack with the APIs and all the integrations, and all of that leaves them open to cybersecurity risk and attack. They said CISOs in particular are getting wise to this and wanting to consolidate the tech stack. So that was the first time that I'd heard that one, which I was like, well, that also makes a lot of sense. And so, long story short, everyone seems to have their own reason for churn, and every organization, right, has their reasons for churn. But I do hear some patterns across the board in terms of like consolidation of tech stack, closing of bad deals. The other one that comes up a lot actually in conversations, which I feel particularly passionate about, is more than ever right now, a product has to meet customers' outcomes, expectations, and solve business problems. So companies buy solutions to solve a business problem. And so they're only going to keep your solution if you continue to solve a problem, which means that you continue to drive value, you continue to drive impact, right? And so we're not doing a very good job of truly driving value and demonstrating that impact on the company's business, right? That one comes up a lot and a lot. And I always say, well, why is that? Why can we not seem to connect our solution with the problem that we're solving, the value that we're delivering, and measure that value? Why is that so hard? And there's two things that come up over and over and over again on this. One is data, that like organizations don't have the right level of data to effectively prove that they are solving real problems for customers. So one is data. I get into a lot of data discussions. And then the other one that is a completely solvable problem that drives me nuts is we do not train our customer success managers to have those conversations.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I think a lot of these reasons I can recognize and as a pattern working with my customers or hearing on the market. However, there's probably one reason that people don't talk about, and it's called Wall Street. And if you look at the Wall Street and how the narrative is being developed over there for those leading enterprise businesses in the tech world, is that the main reason for their stock to go up is margin expansion. And that is fueled by the expectations around AI. I think if you are today a company and you are on the New York Stock Exchange and you don't have an AI story, you probably are devalued by 20-30%, if not more. And that's becoming a prevalent requirement across the indexes. And I think every single company will need to have that story. That's where the investors are willing to pay the premium. If that's the case, every single private company is being benchmarked against these companies. If you are in a SaaS business and you don't have it and that doesn't hold up, that means the investor's not getting margins that the market is giving the premium. That means your IPO is not giving the money or acquisition. That's either way, right? Exit is an exit. You're going to have a valuation and it's going to be done based on something. So I think that's the one reason why a lot of these companies just scramble for profitability. And one way to retain the customer is just to prove that you are indispensable. So to your point about a product, well, there you go. If you were getting money for years doing some shitty tool that was doing a one thing out of 150 things that people do every day because you could just get a money asking on the street, well, that is over. So I see that there's a lot of connection to the market and how the stocks are performing and how these VCs actually is seeing some of these platforms. Actually, I use the word platforms, but a lot of these tools are just tools. They're not platforms. So anything you right now see is getting a lot of money is a platform. If you have a utility tool, forget about this. Nobody will give you money. Maybe friends, maybe family, maybe neighbors. That's it. VCs.
That's a great point. It reminds me that I talked to a bunch of investors back in the spring. So I was I was trying to think of where I was. Doesn't matter. I was somewhere where there was a whole bunch of investors and there was startups that were demoing their products and they were looking for funding. And the investors I talked to said, if that product or solution doesn't have AI, there's no way that we are going to invest in it. Right. So I think you have a great point there about like every company is scrambling to develop some sort of an AI functionality to stay competitive, to attract these dollars and to continue to stay relevant, and also their valuation, right? It impacts their valuation. I agree with you that the rest of the companies are just they're saying, you know what, forget it. I'm not going to try and go get money. We're going to try and be profitable. But to be profitable means that you have to be cutting costs, right? You have to be super efficient. You also have to really hold on to your customers, right? You don't want to lose any of your customers. You've got to drive value for them in a very meaningful way. And you mentioned a lot of these companies that have point solutions as opposed to platforms. So, I mean, I think there's only a matter of time before, well, the market changes, right? All the time we have companies that are sort of falling out, right? They can't hold on to their customers. They can't drive new business. They're not getting the funding. And then we've got all these new AI tools, right, that are shooting in and getting these crazy valuations. But I strongly, myself and a number of others strongly predict that AI companies will go through massive churn over the next little while, right? There's a lot of hype, there's a lot of fluff, there's a lot of experimentation. A lot of people I know who are experimenting with AI or experimenting with 5+ tools, maybe up to 10, right? And organizations are doing the same thing. right? They're experimenting with all kinds of tools. Let's try this, let's try that, whatever. And so we're all in this experimentation phase. But then there's the steady state adoption phase, which is next, right? Which is not the phase that we're in. We're all in experimentation. And right in the middle, between experimentation and true adoption, is this great big trough of disillusionment, is what they call it, where we all realize that like these AI tools are not as good as we thought they were. They're not meeting our expectations. They don't do what we thought they were going to do. We can't run our full customer success team based on agents and AI, right? And so we're going to go through this big like trough of disillusionment where we're like, oh, this is not nearly as good as we thought it was going to be. We're going to drop all the tools, right, that we have been experimenting with that we're like, you know what, that one's not as good as this one. This one, it doesn't work the way I thought. And then we're going to finally get to this state of adoption. So a lot of these AI companies are booming right now. And a whole bunch of them are just going to bust, or we're going to actually see like which ones actually have something worthwhile, worth keeping.
Yeah, I think AI is only as good as the foundation it's built on, right? Like oftentimes I think about, I mean, there's many different applications of AI, but like a lot of times it's like instead of using a UI, you're using AI. Well, if what's happening behind that UI or AI isn't good, it doesn't really fucking matter. And so I think that I think actually like these SaaS companies that have done well are in a real potential like reckoning in how they've priced their product. Like they're going to have to get more outcome consumption based than they've been in the past, most likely. But if they have a good product, they just have to let people interact with their product in different ways now through a UI, through AI, use AI to build things faster or deliver information in a better way. And I think the good ones will survive. And yes, I think there's lots of AI tools out there that are not doing great. I do want to switch gears a little bit. You obviously do a lot of advising to companies. How do you think and speak with these companies who are building out the CS function? What are kind of like the triggers and thresholds that indicate that it's time to really invest into customer success?
This is a great question. And I always laugh at this question because I get asked it all the time where it's like, when should we create a customer success function? When should I think about this? And I'm like, okay, well, when either your customers start leaving, that would be a good time, right? Or anytime, maybe you should start thinking about it before your customers leave.
When you start to have customers, that's probably a good time, right? Yeah.
Exactly. When you start to have customers, that would be a good time. So I always laugh at this one because, if you look at how SaaS companies progress, right, as they mature, typically in the 0 to 10 million, it's all about new business. Acquire, 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 acquire. Get people, get logos, get customers in the door, right? We'll figure out how to keep them later, but get them. It's just all about acquisition. And then after 10 million, it tends to switch and it's all about retention, right? And then once a company releases their second product, it's all about expansion, right? Is typically how it goes. But if you're sub 10 million, the second you have a customer, you should be thinking about how to keep that customer long term, right? So I get that, 0 to 10 million is all about acquisition, but also if your customers are just leaving you, if you are selling to the wrong ICP, right? You're just closing anything, then that's not going to work either, right? So you do want to bring in the right customers and hold on to those customers long term. And the way that you hold on to those customers is by proving value, by delivering value, that you're solving a business problem for them, that you're ingrained right into their workflows, ideally. And so you want to be keeping these customers long term because those customers become referrals that bring in new business, right? Like it's a flywheel, right? Of like the more customers you bring in and they're a good fit and they tell others, and then you get more customers, right? You want to keep that flywheel going and you want to value your customers right from the very beginning and give them a great experience. So I always laugh a little bit because I know a lot of companies wait to develop this function. A lot of startups don't truly understand this function either. That like a lot of founders come from either a product or a sales background or an engineering type background or an industry background. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of founders that come from a customer success background. Now there are some. but there's not a lot, right? And I think a lot of people think, well, understanding and keeping customers is not that hard. There's this perception that like all the hard work is to get the customer. Once we've got them, it's not that hard to keep them, right? And I would say, oh, that's so wrong, right? It is hard to keep them. The customers can switch products so easily right now, right? Like the cost of switching is low. So as easily as you acquire them, they will easily leave, right? At least when I talk with go-to-market leaders, there's this perception I'm always up against, which is, we'll just make customers happy. It's not that hard, right? In this day and age, it is hard. It's not about making customers happy. In fact, I talked to someone last week, and I'm going to tell you a quick story. I talked to someone last week. She's a customer success leader. She's a director. She said to me, I'm having trouble getting taken seriously within the organization. And I said, okay. She said, like, help. What should I do? And I said, okay, listen, the only difference between a director and a vice president of customer success and a vice president of customer success and a chief customer officer, apart from experience and some knowledge, there's one other fundamental difference, and that's how they communicate. So I said, you're going to communicate like you're talking to the CFO. So learn to speak the language of the CFO. And she was like, okay. So I was like, here's some words that I immediately want you to eliminate from your vocabulary. Okay. I was like, making customers happy. Gone. I was like, please you're not here to make customers happy. Okay. That's gone. Delighting customers or providing a great customer experience. I also don't really like that one. So I was like, that's gone. Then I said, now hear me out. Usage, driving usage and adoption, gone, right? All this like fluffy language about like, oh, we make customers happy, we drive usage and adoption. I was like, you're going to talk about how you are the steward of the revenue for the company, right? How customer success is sitting on all the money, right? You're going to talk about the revenue that you drive, the revenue that you save, and the revenue that you make, right? And the efficiency that you drive across your team. And you're not going to talk about how you make customers happy. You're going to talk about how you solve customers' problems and the outcomes that matter to their business.
Way more sales language and financial language than anything, because all those terms you just used are great for like talking to the marketing team. But even the marketing team needs to adopt that language of more like hard numbers.
They have to. They have to, and they don't. So I like the approach because you need to learn how to speak to the CFO, who is actually in these days that we just described earlier, is becoming a key storyteller. Well, like it or not, that's what it is. So if you provide a fuel for that, or call it ammunition, that's definitely something that you will increase the chances that you're going to be in hers or his, graces, right? I think that's what it is. So I think it's a great advice to get these days.
Just going back to your earlier point, I started my career as an account manager, and one of the things I think account management or customer success does really well is help define the ICP. So, like, customer success is really good at pushing back on sales who are selling bad deals and advising on like what's working, what's not working, what type of customer do we need, and what do they need to be interested in. And in a void where you don't have that feedback to the sales team and the product team, you really are missing out on a lot of information that could inform your business and go-to-market strategy. So I think the sooner the better. And I am seeing a lot of startups in my periphery hiring that first. Like they'll do founder-led sales and they'll go and hire CS prior, which I'm like, ooh, I think that's a good move. Why aren't customer success leaders starting more companies? Like, I think that they know the most about customer problems and what needs to be solved. Do you have any like theories on why that is?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Why aren't customer success leaders becoming CCOs? And then why are those CCOs not becoming CEOs? And here's my theory on this. I think it's for exactly the reason I said a minute ago, is because customer success leaders, we have not learned to communicate at that executive level. We have not learned to communicate in a way that gives credibility to the function and the power that we hold. And unless you can communicate at that level, you will never get to the C-suite and you will never get to CEO. And if you start your own company, you won't be taken seriously. This is my theory. It's like we have gotten lost in some really fluffy language and we have this history of, oh yeah, just create a customer success department when you have customers. Like they do everything, right? They'll delight your customers. It's the thing to do in SaaS, right? You should have a customer success department. We don't know what they do, but you should have one, right? That's kind of like the historical fluff that has surrounded customer success of like, you know, you just create this thing when you have customers. We don't know what they do. In fact, they do pretty much everything. I don't know. Just create them. They figure themselves out. Go. Right. And that worked in sort of this age of like growth at all costs when you were getting tons of new business in the door. Right. It didn't matter if you were losing customers. I was director of customer success, large company. We had a lot of customers coming in the door. We had great growth, hyper growth. Okay. I was leading the customer success department and customers would leave us. They would churn. So I'm new in my role. And I said, what happens when a customer churns? And they said, nothing. And I said, what? And they were like, well, nothing. We have so many customers coming in the door that if one leaves us, like there's no follow up, we don't get in touch with them. We will try and save them, but like we don't, if we lose one,
Bend over backwards. Yeah.
right? That was the environment in which customer success was sort of born, where it was like, oh, we lost a customer. That's fine. We got 10 more, like, right? But that's not the environment we're in today, right? And so customer success, we are holding literally, we're the stewards of the revenue of the company. And the company is relying on us to renew that revenue and expand it. And that's the revenue that keeps the lights on, pays people's compensation, invests in R&D. Like if you're a $30 million company, I say, well, customer success is holding or the stewards of $30 million, right? New business sales might be bringing 8 million in this year, but we are holding 30 million. So I would say customer success is sitting on all the money. So to go back to my earlier point, we haven't learned to communicate like we are the stewards of that revenue, that like, right? That we are we hold all the money. So I truly think that's why customer success leaders are not progressing sort of up. They're not becoming CEOs because you have to be able to communicate at that level. And very few leaders do this really well.
Yeah, or why they're not even becoming CROs. I have a big gripe where I think sales tactics of the past will not work anymore and coming from partnerships. I think you have to really like build a relationship and build trust. And I think CS and partnerships are really good at that. And historically, sales leaders are not as good at that. There needs to be more routes. The language is definitely part of it for VPs to move up into that C-suite so they have enough money to go start a company and prestige and industry recognition to go raise money and whatnot.
I think often the customer success is not considered to be a better storyteller than sales leader or marketer. And I think often that's where they're losing when they consider for CROs. And let's be clear, every company has their own product and their own market and their own industry and all the other things that should determine what type of skill set you need at the top of that organization. And the setup has something to do with it. But I think where the customer success is being heard is when you making a big splash, when you start helping to expand the contracts, and out of that 50K, you suddenly becoming a 500K deal. That's where you're getting attention. So it's something that also the customer success organization needs to understand, and a leader has to understand if they want to sit at the table and make a decision. Right? You agree with you. You have to be a good storyteller, and you have to diversify depending who you're talking to. Your key ally is the CFO. You need to ensure that you have a plan how to build the expansion program and process. You need to ensure that you understand how to adopt the product, right? So you're holding the keys to the product development essentially. And then the last thing, it's always in my mind when I'm talking to the customer success is, you need to understand your customer inside out. Nobody else in your organization can understand this better than you, right? So often the leaders in that space, and I think your skill set can help them to be better at it. They're a little bit passive and they're a little bit idealistic. They're a little bit too much process oriented, too much ticket oriented, too much support. That mindset has to shift towards the other things that I just mentioned earlier, because when they do that, they are better storytellers. That's where they're going to win. That's my 2 cents on how I see the customer success often is failing in that debate, even though they have a lot to offer in the company.
You brought me back to a time 15 years ago when I was in account management. We had a CS leader who was super process oriented, and processes are not bad. Like, I agree with processes, but the process was put on a pedestal. And I remember being like, this is one of the reasons I eventually went into business development. I was like, I just want to build relationships with these people and really understand them and get them to spend more with us. Like, that was my goal. And I'm not a process person. I hire people who are process people because that is not my skill set. But it like crushed my soul a little bit. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how much process takes up the CS world.
I mean, it's interesting. So you're both talking. I mean, I was equally guilty of this, right? As a young sort of, immature CS leader, meaning new to the role. Like when I was new to the role and I would talk about customer success, I would talk about things like segmenting customers, health scores, driving adoption, right? Number of tickets if I had the support team under me, right? And time to resolution, all of the what I would now call like these are core process things. Yes, and I would talk about, time to value, and of course I would talk about net revenue retention and gross revenue retention, but it was all this like customer success sort of talk or speak, right? Of like, okay, and to your point, it's all the process stuff. It's like, okay, it's all the process and how do we measure it, and it's all in this like customer success sort of language, which is all fine. There is
Yeah.
like there's a rule for all of this. But to be taken seriously, right? You do have to tie yourself to the money and you have to understand the broader impact of your organization, right? Of customer success within the company, within the valuation of the company, what the board cares about, the things that the CFO cares about. And I actually found that going from a customer success leader who could talk a good process, right? Talk about customers, segmentation, talk about health scores, talk about whatever, outreach strategies and touch points and QBRs and blah, 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 right? To go from that to being able to have a really intelligent sort of peer conversation with the CFO and the CEO was a big gap, right? Like it wasn't, I didn't understand sort of the business language. I remember when I came out of one of my roles and I talked to the CEO of the company and I said, I really need to increase my business acumen, my knowledge of how investors and boards work, the things they care about, the language of the CFO, how valuations work, all of these things. I wanted to understand them better. And I was like, what should I do to increase my business acumen? And he didn't have a great response for me. He was kind of like, I don't know. It's not that hard. It's just like this and this and this. And I was like, okay. But what it made me realize is it's my responsibility. I'm going to have to go figure this out. I'm going to have to fill this gap. Even the CEO is going to tell me how to do this, right? Nobody sits you down with your first board presentation and teaches you how to prepare or what to say. Nobody does this. And so I went out and I joined Pavilion, right? And I started taking courses through there like crazy. I took like revenue architecture through Pavilion, and that's winning by design, right? I took that course. I took CCO school. I took CRO school. I took AI and automation. I took a fractional leadership course. I took enterprise selling. I was like, all right, I'm going to figure this out. And then I'm like YouTubing, like, okay, how do I read an income statement, right? Because a lot of people, when they get to that executive leadership level, they cannot read an income statement. They don't understand what's on like the P&L, right? All the lines, right? That you go through an investor statement, right? And so start YouTubing this and like, what does all this mean? My knowledge is still a work in progress, but let me tell you, it's way better than it was even a year ago, right? And so my point is like, we have to get out of the daily, like the process. This is my function. This is my role. If you want to move up in leadership and truly make a difference, you do have to just go out and educate yourself, right? And figure this stuff out and listen to intelligent people talk. I listened to an economist talk about the state of the Canadian and the US economy 2 weeks ago. Let me tell you, I didn't understand 50% of what he said, being very honest. Did not understand 50%. But of the 50% that I did understand, I am much smarter and much more informed than I was before I listened to him talk. So you don't have to understand everything, right? And you get there over time, but you are responsible for your own knowledge and your own learning. That's the point I'm trying to make here is like nobody will teach you this stuff.
You need to understand the broad strokes so you can sit in a meeting. I am not an expert on financial language, but I can hold my own, right? I hear Demetrius is willing to consult with anyone that wants to learn about a P&L statement because he knows it like the back of his hand.
I was a finance person for many years. And to your point about economists, I'm a subscriber for almost 20 years. So it's something that I live and breathe with, right? But I feel like what you're talking about is just contextualizing your job and being a leader. And conclusion here is that no matter which function you are, you have to demonstrate the leadership skills. Otherwise, your function will be forgotten in the organization. And that's just to be clear, that doesn't mean that you are the most noisy person. It means that you're bringing some important information on the table and you're not only providing something that is descriptive of what you do, is actually something that is prescriptive, right? And also something that you can bet that you can complete, you can actually deliver, right? Because often people just do the nice slides and there's like, how are we going to do this? I don't know. Well, I'm not sure why I have you here in the room because when you're coming to me with a plan, you probably should have a plan how you're going to do it, right? So speaking about the descriptive analytics or approaches, I remember you had a very strong opinion about the QBRs. This is widely adopted concept in companies. So I want to hear your spiel on this and what is your take?
In fact, this is the most asked question I actually get of anyone. Any leader, any podcast I'm on, they always ask about the 15-minute QBR. And I'm always asked, like, how is this possible, right? That you can run a quarterly business review with an executive in 15 minutes. So before I tell you how, I'm going to tell you a story. Okay. I'm going to tell you how this came about. So I'm training customer success team. Okay. So remember, I was looking for my next vice president of customer success role. I was interviewing at 30 companies. And while I was doing that, I was training customer success teams pro bono. Okay. And I was training them on things like commercial negotiations, how to have a consultative approach, and a number of other topics. And so I was training this one customer success team. I was not talking about the QBR, but it came up in the Q&A. And CSM asked me, how do I get executives to show up to my quarterly business review? And I sort of paused and I thought, why don't you just run the meeting in 15 minutes? And I said, okay, hear me out. And this is literally like, I'm just thinking on the fly, right? I was like, hear me out. Every executive has time for a 15-minute meeting. Okay. You can get a meeting with an executive for 15 minutes, half an hour, maybe an hour, definitely not, but 15 minutes, yes. So I was like, okay, in that 15 minutes, you only need to cover three things: the value that they're getting from your product or service to date. How can they get more value from your product or service? And three recommendations. That's it. That's all. Because an executive, they only want to answer two questions. Am I getting value from this product or service? And should I keep spending money on it? So in your quarterly business review, you better answer those two questions. Are they getting value and should they keep spending money? Well, okay. One, yes, you're getting value and here's the value you're getting. Number two, here's how you can get more value. And number three, here are 3 recommendations I have for how you get that more value, right? It's all about value. It's all about impact. That's how you get recurring revenue. You deliver recurring value or recurring impact. So I was like, just cover these 3 things. So then after the training, I go back to my desk, okay? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to create a LinkedIn post on this. So I created a LinkedIn post and I thought, well, people aren't going to really believe me on how to do this. And so I was like, I'm going to create a slide on here is how you do this. So you're going to cover the value that they're getting, how they get more value, and 3 recommendations. And I gave some examples, created 1 slide, okay? And my thought process behind this was I'm going to give this to customer success leaders and they can drop it into their next team meeting where it's like, hey, if you ever thought about running a QBR in 15 minutes, Andrea said you can do this and here's how we would do this. And so I put that out on LinkedIn and I said in the post, just comment 15 if you want the slide. Because I was like, I want to be able to send it to anyone who wants it. Well, 2,000 people commented on the post. And it wasn't just CS leaders, it was account executives and individual contributors and CROs and CEOs and founders of companies and people who were not in SaaS, they were in healthcare and finance and insurance and like all these different areas. And it's because at some point, you're running a meeting with executives and you need to know how to do that in 15 minutes. Like we've all gotten into a meeting with an executive audience where they said, you know what, we've got to run to another meeting. Can we just cut this meeting in half? We only have 15 minutes, or I'm going to be here for the first 15 minutes and then I have to drop. And if you don't know how to run a meeting in 15 minutes, you're just going to butcher the meeting, right? Like you're going to stumble all over it. You're like, right? And so 2,000 people commented. And then I got interviewed on a couple more podcasts, right? And people were asking about the 15-minute QBR. And so again, I put out a post on LinkedIn. I was like, if you missed it the first time, here's the podcast. I'm going to talk about the 15-minute QBR and put 15 in the comments if you want the slide. Well, 3,000 people commented on that one. So now 5,000 people had like over 500,000 views, right? And so I actually hired someone to send it out through LinkedIn because I was like, I was spending hours on LinkedIn, but I really wanted people to have it because I thought this is a game changer for companies and for leaders. And so I'm going to wrap a bow on this story. And so I put this framework out, okay, into the universe. And then people kept asking me, well, have you tried it? Have you done it? Does it work? And I was like, my honest answer was no. I haven't actually tried it yet. But right now, with the customer success team that I'm working with, we are trying it. I just trained them all on how to run a QBR. The QBR is actually half an hour. And then I tell them what to do if they only get 15 minutes and how to peel it back. The whole QBR is 5 slides. They said if you only get 15 minutes, you show these 3 slides, the value they're getting so far, how they get more value, and your 3 recommendations. That's it. So I've trained their customer success team on how to do this. The CRO of that company, he joins one of my trainings and he was like, I don't believe that this can be done. You can't run a QBR in 15 minutes. In fact, they could just run a QBR with a customer that was 4 hours. Okay. And so he was like, you can't do this in 15 minutes. And
4
I was like,
hours. What are you doing with 4 hours?
4 hours. Anyways. So I was like, no, it's a day. That's a day, right? You're going to get them all in a room and I don't know what you're going to talk about for 4 hours. But anyways, it was 4 hours.
Maybe they mix this up with a workshop.
Yeah.
Something, because that's what it is.
So he said it can't be done. And so I showed him how to do it. I was like, okay, I trained him and I was like, here's what you do if you only have 15 minutes. You're going to cover these 3 slides. You're going to cover the value they're getting, how they get more value, and 3 recommendations. At the end of that training, he was like, no, you can do it. No, I believe you. Like this, I've never seen it done this way, but like you can absolutely do it this way. And so that's how the 15-minute QBR came up. If you're listening to this and you're trying it, in your organization. I would love to hear how that's going. If you don't know how to launch it in your organization, contact me on LinkedIn. I have a launch kit for how to do this. And if you're trying it and failing at it, you better just DM me directly, okay? Because I'll help you fix it because you can do this.
I want to make my organization do this, so I'll be following up after. I also think there's like a opportunity for salespeople to think about this in a pitch and how do they pitch and discovery and in a 15-minute, like short and sweet pitch. We don't need to be sitting. When I get a 45-minute invite for a pitch, I'm like, kill me now. I don't want to talk to you for 45 minutes. I want to like understand if I should set up another call to dive in deeper.
It's like an opportunity to be a leader, to demonstrate leadership, right? Like, this is it. I mean, nobody will tell you you can do it in 15 minutes, but try. And if you succeed, well, who comes on top,
Yeah.
right? I mean, isn't it obvious? I mean, I understand it's a challenging mindset shift from something that was done in a more excessive, time consuming way. But definitely you have to shift your focus towards something that is more actionable than descriptive. And that's why I was also in one of those 5,000 people that reacted to this, because I said, that is true. That really is true, right? You don't need all of that time spent on the meaningless conversation, because if that would drive an action, I would agree. But it's not, right? And if you're gonna get something, if you get the same result or better result within 15 minutes, that's already a success. Well, and your job is customer success, so you better be successful, right? Anyway, so I'm just playing with the words, but that's exactly my point, right? That's your leadership. That's your opportunity.
Dimitri, you talk a lot about leadership, right? And the responsibility, the onus on the person, right, to step up and be a leader. And I will say the catch 22 of all of this that I find, because I talk with a lot of leaders, right? I still try and talk with 25 people a week, even though I'm also working for clients and on client work. I really try and talk with as many people as I can a week. And I will say that leaders are very overwhelmed in their roles, right? And the asks and the demands on leaders today are almost crushing, right? I talk to a lot of leaders who are just feeling under supported, not having sort of all the knowledge they needed, just feeling sort of the demands of their role. And then this layer of like AI sort of on top of it, of like, what are you doing with AI? Right. And leaders sort of thinking, they're doing this off the side of their desk of like, okay, well, would to try and do AI too, right? And integrate this. That's where fractional leadership can make a difference. By bringing in a fractional leader alongside your leader, leaders are hesitant to do this because they feel like if I have to bring in an expert or someone to help me, that I'm not doing my job or I am not competent or somehow I am devaluing myself in my organization. And I would say they can't be farther from the truth, right? As a leader, you need other people to come alongside you. If you're going through a major pricing analysis, bring in an expert on pricing. If you are wanting to retrain your customer success team, bring in someone who's an expert on training, right? If you have a churn problem, bring in an expert on churn. Like, I think a big shift that's going to happen in SaaS companies over the next little while, and I see this already happening, is it's okay to bring in an expert to help with specific things. In fact, you should bring in an expert. You shouldn't expect your go-to-market leaders to be able to do everything all the time and run the day-to-day of the organization, right? Like if you're going through some fundamental shifts where you have some big problems to solve, or, you do want to launch AI, bring in an expert on AI. Like this is okay. And you can hire a fractional leader with very little risk, right? For a fraction of the cost for a short engagement and get something high impact without overburdening your existing leaders. I think it's a mistake to think that our current operators are going to do everything, right? I don't think that it's possible. And I say that from experience because as a former vice president of customer success, I could never do everything. In fact, there were some things that I did very poorly because I just didn't have enough time.
What are you talking about, Andrea? I'm not stressed at all. I'm like stressed every single day. I'm like, how on earth am I going to do all this? And I think especially with AI, it's so new. Like, how are you expected to be you haven't done this before. Most people have not done this before. And if you're managing a large team, where are you going to find cycles to go and dig into it? How is AI going to impact customer support? How do you think it's going to change how that whole function does its job every day?
This is a great question. And so I'm going to correct your question. Okay, so you asked how
Please
it's going
do.
to impact customer support. So it's going to impact customer support in one way, I think, and customer success in a different way. So I'll deal with customer support first, but like customer support is almost the easy sort of low hanging fruit, right? Anything that we can automate there. I've seen some brilliant agents, right, as like that sort of first level of response for customers. It doesn't mean that they're your only response. Let me just put a big asterisk beside this, right? Companies that are running agents as their only support are going to get into some trouble here, right? Because we all know that agents cannot cover all of your customer support. I'm going to tell Dimitri, this is the fourth story. I'm going to tell a real story here. Friend of mine, she, number four, okay? But this is just a case in point that agents cannot run your whole support team. Friend of mine, she was creating a website. She was using AI, this super slick tool to help her create a website. So she's creating the website. Everything's going really well. And then I don't know what she was trying to do, but she was trying to do something on the website and she's asking the AI and it says, yeah, you just do this and this and this. And she's trying it and she can't do it. And then she's asking the AI and it's giving her the same instructions. And she was like, okay, well, I can't figure this out. So she calls support. Okay. She gets into touch with support and she gets another agent. She gets an agent and she asks the agent, okay, well, here's what I want to do. And it gives her the instructions. And she was like, no, like, I cannot do that. Like, you're not giving me the right information. This is not working. Right. So she's persistent and she keeps trying to get in touch with customer support and she keeps getting bounced between agents. She finally gets to talk to a real human person. And what does that person say to her? I can't help you. I'm so overwhelmed in my role. I cannot help you.
What?
Cannot help
Really?
you. Yeah, cannot help you. And so this is my big thing is like you cannot run your entire support organization just based on agents. We need human oversight, right? And customers still need to be able to talk to a human. So that's number one. Like there's definitely a role for AI and agents and I see a big role in support. But please do not run all of your support organization just using agents, okay? And then in customer success, it's really interesting. So again, there's a lot of experimentation happening in customer success. Only about 40% of organizations are using AI in customer success, which is actually a pretty low number. And of those organizations, they're still using it for a lot of like content creation or researching customers, really low sort of barrier to entry stuff. There's very little of like automating the customer journey or around onboarding. There's a mixed bag around sort of health scores. But my point is, it's still pretty early days for AI in customer success. I'm actually running a session on the AI driven customer success organization. It's next week, actually, at this time. But there's some cool experimenting being done, but there's a lot of opportunity. And so next week in our session, I'm actually going to have three people talk about how they're using AI in customer success. I'm going to have Liron join from Aligned. I'm going to have Theba come from Deal, where she's using it in her digital customer success team, and my friend Kate, who creates AI agents for customer success. We're going to talk about using AI in the practical sort of way in customer success. But my point is like there's a lot of experimentation, but we're still really just barely scratching the surface in customer success. And there's two reasons I think for this, and then we can get off this topic. But there's two reasons why I think this is happening. And one is bandwidth, that leaders are just like, it's hard, right? Exactly. Especially if you have a churn problem, a growth problem, a leadership problem, another big whopping problem in the organization, right? And you're being asked to do a lot more with less. In fact, a lot of organizations are making cuts to headcount, to resources, but without having the AI even in place yet. So they are making the cuts before having the good replacement. So leaders are sort of left scrambling. And then the other reason is leaders are just sort of we're still in this curiosity experimentation phase. We don't really know how to effectively leverage AI. We're all just learning, right? And some of us are further along that spectrum than others, but we're really just learning together. And there's this sense from leaders of like, am I being left behind? Am I the only one that's like not hasn't automated the customer journey yet? Well, like, no, you're not, right? So there's a lot of experimentation, sort of figuring things out and creating this culture of experimentation within the team of let's all learn together. But what that's also creating is a massive plethora of AI sort of tools within organizations. In fact, I talked with one company that told me so they have their AI approved tools. And then they estimate that they have 76 unapproved AI tools running in their organization. So, in addition to the ones that they've approved and meet policy and that they have standardized and said their employees can use, they estimate that there is a 76 additional ones that are being used that are outside of compliance and are outside of the organization's policy. This is very typical. This is what's happening in companies.
Right now, a lot of leaders are figuring out what are the new tools, especially the AI tools that they can go and use across their team, where historically that would have been done in conjunction with the operations teams. And so I think the operations teams are going to have to really get up to speed quickly. But a lot of products or platforms are building AI into their platform and not necessarily thinking about how do we build AI internally. So we're in a big shift with AI. Let's wrap this up with some rapid fire questions. So who are one or two companies that you think is doing really exciting or innovative things when it comes to how they approach customer relationships?
Oh, this is such a great question. And I could name off two companies right away. The truth is, I don't have a good answer for you. A lot of companies are figuring this out, and I have yet to see a company that I'm like, wow, they're doing such a great job. I've seen some cool things within some companies, but I think there's still a lot of just figuring things out. So I wish I could tell you two companies. I will say there are some pockets and some cool things happening, but I've yet to find a company that I would fully jump in on and say like they're doing an amazing job with customer success.
Any platforms that you think are like great to support customer success teams, like tools that you see customer support and success teams using that you love?
There are a few. There's like I'm always looking at new tools and like seeing what's out there. And there's definitely some cool ones. Like I think of like On Ramp, there's Cluso. Those are two that like oh, there's Gradual. So there's some cool ones, right? That come to mind in terms of what they're doing in this space. I'll be honest in saying I have not used these tools myself yet. I see the good work that they're doing. There's a lot of really neat new tools out there and certainly some that I've been following. I think it's a little bit of a wait and see which ones are really going to make an impact in this space.
What's a book or a podcast that you'd recommend to make a CS leader more knowledgeable?
I'll do a plug for my friend Chad. He released the Strategic CSM. So, Chad Hornfeld, you can check out that book. I've been reading that, and I think it's a really great sort of quote unquote manual for a new CSM. Very timely, just came out a couple months ago. So, if you're listening, and especially if you're an individual contributor, your customer success manager, highly recommend checking out the Strategic CSM.
And what top 3 tips do you want to leave us with for CS leaders or ICs or teams?
Top 3 tips. This is a hard one to nail down. Okay, well, number 1, try out my 15-minute QBR. Try it out and see if it works. I told you can DM me, right? Tell me if it's working. If you need help launching it, like just send me a DM. So, number 1. Number 2, invest in training your CSMs. Okay, they're some of the least trained teams in go to market. I never understood this. The demands of that role and the expectations have gone up exponentially, right? We need to be effectively showing how we are solving our customers' problems with our solutions and delivering value. That's a different skill set than your CSMs have today. So if you need training, again, reach out to me. Number 3, learn to speak the language of the CFO. And that onus is unfortunately on you, right? But you could do it. So go out there, listen to some podcasts, follow a couple economists if you need to, listen to the language your CFO is using. There's some great communities out there. I love Pavilion. Winning by Design creates great stuff, but really work to up-level yourself as a leader, and communication is key to that.
I love it. Well, Andrea, I think we could have talked to you for another hour and continue to have a great conversation. Thank you for sharing so many great insights and stories about CS. And if you're looking to learn more from Andrea, please go check her out on LinkedIn and reach out if you have questions.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to
Thank
our
you.
audience for listening and watching. And please go follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube at Market Genius AI to see even more from other leaders in the go-to-market space.